The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the Naval Special Warfare Command building as Captain Raven Ghost, Nakamura, pushed her mop bucket down the sterile corridor. Her weathered hands gripped the handle with the same precision that once commanded multi-million-dollar fighter jets over hostile airspace. The brass nameplate on her janitor's uniform read simply, R. Nakamura. No rank. No recognition of the distinguished flying cross gathering dust in a storage unit 3 states away. She paused at the memorial wall, photographs of fallen warriors staring back at her with eyes that held secrets only she understood. The irony wasn't lost on her. Once, she'd been the ghost in the machine, the pilot who appeared from nowhere to rain hellfire on enemy positions before vanishing into the night sky. Now she was just another ghost, invisible to the operators who walked these halls discussing missions she could have flown blindfolded. The mystery began with a single photograph tucked behind a loose tile in the men's restroom, a photograph that shouldn't exist. Raven had discovered it 3 weeks ago while cleaning, and it haunted her dreams. The grainy image showed a downed aircraft in terrain she recognized from classified briefings, but the timestamp made her blood run cold. The mission had supposedly been scrubbed before takeoff, yet here was proof that someone had flown into the valley of death she'd been ordered to avoid. Her radio crackled to life, interrupting her thoughts. Maintenance to Building 7, report to the executive corridor immediately. The voice belonged to Sergeant Major Hendricks, a man who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan and treated the cleaning staff like furniture. Raven's pulse quickened as she wheeled her cart toward the administrative wing. She'd spent 18 months perfecting the art of invisibility, becoming background noise in conversations that could reshape global warfare. But something felt different today. The air carried tension like static before a thunderstorm. As she rounded the corner, General Patricia Vaughn emerged from the briefing room, her silver stars catching the light like armor. Vaughn was a legend, the first woman to command a joint special operations task force, with a reputation for seeing through facades that others couldn't penetrate. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, and Raven felt exposed, as if her carefully constructed anonymity had crumbled in that single glance. "Ms. Nakamura," the general said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a blade, "I believe we need to discuss your findings." The mop clattered to the floor as Raven's world tilted on its axis. After 18 months of cleaning up other people's secrets, her own past had finally caught up with her. The photograph burned in her pocket like a live grenade, and she realized that some missions never truly end. They just wait in the shadows, gathering dust until the moment they demand to be acknowledged. The briefing room felt smaller than it had any right to be, its mahogany table reflecting the faces of men who'd built careers on calculated violence. Raven stood at attention beside her abandoned cleaning cart, muscle memory overriding months of practiced servility. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes focused on a point just above General Vaughn's left shoulder. "At ease, Captain," Vaughn said, and the title hit the room like a mortar round. Several officers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to dawning recognition. Commander Jake Morrison, head of SEAL Team 6 operations, leaned back in his chair with the look of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew about the woman who'd been emptying his trash cans. Raven's hands found their natural position behind her back, fingers interlocked with military precision. "General, I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm civilian maintenance staff, assigned to—" "Your Coulson Ghost," interrupted Colonel Samuel Torres, his voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge. 37 confirmed air-to-ground kills, survivor of Operation Phantom Strike, recipient of the Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor. He paused, studying her face. "You're also officially dead, according to military records." The silence that followed was pregnant with possibilities. Raven felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the phantom pain from ejector seat compression that never quite faded. She'd spent so many nights scrubbing floors and replaying the mission that destroyed everything. The screams over the radio, The fireball that should have been her grave. The decision that saved her life but cost her identity. The photograph, Vaughn said, sliding the grainy image across the polished table. Where did you find it? Raven's eyes fixed on the picture, her F-18 Super Hornet, tail number obscured by smoke and debris, nose buried in Afghan soil. She remembered the taste of blood and aviation fuel, the way her hands shook as she triggered the ejection sequence 800 feet above a Taliban stronghold. Behind the mirror in the third-floor restroom, she said quietly. Someone wanted it found, but not easily. Morrison leaned forward, his operator's instincts engaged. That crash site was classified level black. Only 7 people knew the coordinates and 3 of them are dead. His eyes narrowed. You were supposed to die in that valley, weren't you, Ghost? The nickname rolled off his tongue like a prayer for the dead. Raven felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening, like ice giving way to spring water. For 18 months she'd been nobody. Now, suddenly, she was somebody again. Someone whose skills mattered, whose knowledge could tip the balance in wars that existed only in shadows. Yes, sir, she whispered, and the admission tasted like freedom. I was supposed to die, but ghosts don't stay buried forever. The war room's digital displays painted the walls in shifting blues and reds, satellite imagery cycling through coordinates that most people couldn't pronounce. Raven stood before the tactical display, her janitor's uniform incongruous against the high-tech battlefield analysis surrounding her. General Vaughn had dismissed the other officers, leaving only Morrison and Torres to witness what came next. Project Lazarus, Vaughn began, her fingers dancing across a secure tablet. 18 months ago, intelligence suggested a high-value target was coordinating attacks from a compound in the Korangal Valley. Your mission was to provide close air support for a SEAL extraction team. Raven's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She remembered the briefing, the confidence in the intelligence officer's voice as he marked enemy positions on aerial photographs. The same confidence that had nearly gotten 12 operators killed. The mission was scrubbed, she said carefully. Weather conditions were deemed unsuitable for precision strikes. Morrison's laugh held no humor. Weather conditions were perfect, Ghost. Someone wanted you out of that airspace. He activated a holographic display showing the valley in 3-dimensional detail. What you found in that bathroom was proof that you flew the mission anyway. The room fell silent except for the whisper of climate control systems. Raven studied the terrain model, her pilot's eye automatically calculating approach vectors and escape routes. The valley was a death trap, steep walls channeling aircraft into predictable flight paths, perfect for surface-to-air missiles. I remember the radio call, she said finally. Bravo 6-1 requesting immediate close air support. They were pinned down, taking heavy casualties. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I couldn't let them die. Torres manipulated the hologram, highlighting the crash site. Your wingman reported you as KIA after losing visual contact in the smoke. No ejection beacon, no survivor radio traffic. As far as the world knew, Captain Raven Nakamura died that day. But I didn't die, Raven said, touching the scar on her neck where shrapnel had missed her jugular by millimeters. I walked out of that valley, hitched a ride with a supply convoy and disappeared, because someone in this chain of command set me up to fail. Vaughn's expression remained neutral, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the tablet. The intelligence was compromised. We know that now. But 18 months ago we had no choice but to declare you KIA and bury the operation. She paused, studying Raven's face. The question is, why surface now? Why leave that photograph where you knew it would be found? Raven met her gaze directly, the subservience of her cleaning persona completely gone. Because they're going to try again. Same valley, same target, same flawed intelligence. And this time, 12 more operators are going to die unless someone stops it. The weight of her words settled over the room like smoke from a funeral pyre. The secure communications center buzzed with encrypted chatter from operations spanning 3 continents. Raven sat at a workstation that 18 months ago would have been her natural environment, fingers moving across classified databases with the muscle memory of someone born to the digital battlefield. Morrison watched her work, occasionally glancing at the real-time intelligence feeds scrolling across adjacent monitors. Pattern analysis was always your strength, he observed, noting how she cross-referenced personnel assignments with operational timelines. Even at the academy, instructors said you could see connections others missed. Raven's focus never wavered from the screen. Financial records, communication logs, and mission parameters flowed past like water through a sieve, but her trained eye caught the inconsistencies that mattered. 3 operations in the last 6 months, she murmured, all using intelligence from the same source, all resulting in higher than expected casualties. Torres entered carrying 3 cups of coffee that had been brewing since dawn. Asset Nightingale, he said, reading over her shoulder. Human intelligence source, level alpha reliability rating, been feeding us information for 2 years. Level alpha sources don't make mistakes this consistently, Raven said, highlighting discrepancies between reported enemy positions and actual contact reports. Someone's playing both sides, using our own operations to eliminate witnesses. The implications hung in the air like cordite after a firefight. Morrison set down his coffee, the ceramic clicking against metal with unusual loudness. You're suggesting Nightingale is a double agent. I'm suggesting Nightingale is dead, and someone else is wearing his skin. Raven turned to face them, her expression grim with certainty. Look at the communication patterns. Response times have decreased by 40%. Vocabulary analysis shows subtle shifts in syntax, and the intelligence has become increasingly specific about timing and positioning. She pulled up a satellite image of the Korangal Valley, the same terrain that had nearly claimed her life. Red markers indicated confirmed enemy positions, blue showed friendly forces, and yellow marked areas of uncertainty. The pattern formed a perfect kill box, with American forces channeled into predetermined engagement zones. Tomorrow's operation, she continued, uses the exact same tactical approach as the mission that got my aircraft shot down. Same insertion points, same support elements, same extraction timeline. Her finger traced the route on the display. 12 operators are going to fast rope into what amounts to an elaborate ambush. General Vaughn's voice crackled through the intercom system. Ghost, report to the flight line immediately. We're moving up the timeline. Raven stood, the familiar weight of responsibility settling across her shoulders like a flight harness. For 18 months, she'd hidden from this feeling, the terrible burden of knowing that other people's lives depended on her judgment and skill. But hiding was a luxury she could no longer afford. Ma'am, Morrison said as she reached the door, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're alive. She paused without turning around. Ask me again in 12 hours, Commander. If this goes wrong, you might change your mind. The hangar doors rolled open to reveal the sleek silhouette of an F-35C Lightning II, its stealth coating drinking in the fluorescent light like hungry shadows. Raven stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. She'd flown earlier variants, but this machine represented evolution, a predator designed for the modern battlefield where survival depended on invisibility rather than speed. Chief Master Sergeant Elena Rodriguez emerged from beneath the aircraft's wing, grease-stained hands holding a tablet filled with technical specifications. She's all yours, Ghost, Rodriguez said, using the call sign with the casual familiarity of someone who'd worked with legends. Full weapons load, upgraded avionics package, and enough fuel to loiter over target for 3 hours. Raven approached the aircraft like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. Her fingers traced the smooth curves of the fuselage, remembering the tactile relationship between pilot and machine that no simulation could replicate. How long since I've been in a cockpit? 547 days, General Vaughn said, joining them beside the aircraft. But muscle memory doesn't fade and instinct can't be taught. She handed Raven a flight suit bearing the subdued insignia of a captain. The question is, are you ready to be Ghost again? The fabric felt familiar against her skin, each zipper and pocket positioned exactly where her hands expected them to be. Raven had spent so many months wearing the anonymous uniform of civilian maintenance that she'd almost forgotten the weight of identity that came with military bearing. The mission parameters have changed, Vaughn continued as they walked toward the briefing area. Instead of supporting the SEAL operation, you're going to prevent it. Intelligence suggests the enemy has acquired surface-to-air missiles, likely supplied through the same network that's been feeding them our operational plans. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing the valley in real time, thermal imaging revealing heat signatures clustered around known Taliban positions. Satellite reconnaissance confirms at least 3 SA-24 launch sites positioned along the primary insertion route. Ground team would be flying into a textbook turkey shoot. Raven studied the tactical situation with the analytical detachment that had kept her alive through 93 combat missions. The enemy positions formed interlocking fields of fire, creating multiple kill zones with no safe approach vectors for conventional helicopters. The SEALs don't know the mission's been compromised, she observed. They're still planning to execute as scheduled. Correct, Vaughn confirmed. Admiral Chen wants operational security maintained until the last possible moment. Too many people already know about Nightingale's compromise. Her expression hardened. Your job is to sanitize the landing zones and eliminate the SAM threat before the helicopters arrive. Raven felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the physiological response to impending combat that never quite went away. But underneath the anxiety was something else, a sense of coming home to herself after months of exile from her own identity. Rules of engagement, she asked, though she already knew the answer. Whatever it takes, Captain, bring our people home alive. The pre-flight checklist unfolded with ritualistic precision, each switch and button confirmation reconnecting neural pathways that months of civilian life hadn't quite severed. Raven's hands moved through the startup sequence without conscious thought, 20 years of training compressed into muscle memory that responded faster than rational thought. Ghost Tower crackled through her headset as the twin engines spooled to life. Weather is clear, winds light and variable. You're cleared for immediate departure, runway 09er. Tower Ghost, she responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Rolling now. The F-35 accelerated down the runway with predatory grace, 50,000 pounds of advanced warfare technology responding to her touch like a thoroughbred racehorse. At rotation speed, she pulled back gently on the stick, feeling the aircraft transition from earthbound machine to airborne weapon system. As the landscape shrank beneath her, Raven allowed herself a moment of pure appreciation for the sensation she'd been denied for 18 months. This was where she belonged, suspended between earth and sky, responsible for nothing but the mission and the lives depending on her success. Ghost, Overlord, came the voice of Mission Commander Torres through the secure channel. SEAL team is 30 minutes out from insertion. Satellite shows increased thermal activity around the target zone. Raven checked her navigation display, adjusting course toward the Korangal Valley. The same terrain that had nearly killed her now appeared on her tactical screen as a three-dimensional battlefield, complete with real-time intelligence updates and target designations. Overlord Ghost, beginning approach to target area, switching to terrain-following mode. The aircraft's computer took over low-level navigation, keeping her below enemy radar coverage while she focused on weapons systems preparation. 4 AIM-120 AMRAAMs hung from internal bays, supplemented by 2,000 rounds of .25 ammunition for the internal cannon. enough firepower to eliminate a small army, assuming she could find them before they found her. Ghost, be advised, Torres continued. Enemy communications intercept suggests they're expecting our arrival. Recommend extreme caution on approach. The words sent ice through her veins, but Raven forced herself to focus on immediate tactical concerns. Enemy foreknowledge changed everything. What should have been a surprise attack was now walking into prepared defenses. Overlord Ghost copies, beginning electronic warfare sweep. Her displays lit up with electromagnetic signatures as the aircraft's sensors painted a picture of the battlefield below. 3 SA-24 sites, exactly as intelligence had predicted, but positioned with tactical sophistication that suggested professional military advisors rather than irregular fighters. Someone down there knew exactly how she would approach the target, and they were ready for her. The valley opened before her like the throat of some primordial beast, steep walls channeling the F-35 into predetermined approach vectors that any competent air defense commander would have anticipated. Raven dropped to 200 feet above ground level, the aircraft's terrain-following radar painting the jagged landscape in her heads-up display with millimeter precision. Ghost, Overlord. SEAL insertion birds are 15 minutes out. We need those SAM sites eliminated immediately. The first missile launch surprised no one. Raven had been expecting it since entering the valley, watching for the telltale infrared bloom that preceded every surface-to-air engagement. What surprised her was how perfectly positioned the launch site was, exactly where she would have placed it for maximum effectiveness against an aircraft following her current approach. "Missile launch, bearing 270, she called over the radio, her voice calm despite the proximity of death streaking toward her at 3 times the speed of sound. The F-35's defensive systems engaged automatically, deploying chaff and flares while calculating evasive maneuvers. She pulled hard right, G-forces pressing her deep into the ejection seat as the aircraft transitioned from level flight to a knife-edge turn that scraped the valley walls. The missile, confused by electronic countermeasures and decoy flares, detonated harmlessly against the mountainside in a brilliant orange fireball. Ghost, good kill, 2 sites remaining. But Raven was already repositioning for her attack run, the aircraft's weapon systems locked onto the first SAM position. The Hellfire missile dropped cleanly from the internal bay, its trajectory computer-guided toward coordinates that represented 12 American lives hanging in the balance. The explosion illuminated the entire valley for several seconds, secondary detonations suggesting she'd hit an ammunition storage area. 1 down, 2 to go, and the SEAL helicopters were still closing on their insertion point. Overlord Ghost, first target eliminated, beginning approach to Site 2. The second missile came from an unexpected direction, directly ahead rather than from the flanks where conventional tactics suggested it should be positioned. Raven felt her training take over, hands and feet working in perfect coordination to place the aircraft in an impossible attitude that no missile guidance system could predict. The F-35 snap-rolled inverted, diving toward the valley floor while simultaneously climbing relative to the surrounding terrain. Physics became her ally as she used the mountainous environment to break the missile's lock, the weapon impacting harmlessly into solid rock. Site 2, eliminated, she reported as her second Hellfire found its target. The explosion sent debris cascading down the mountainside, temporarily obscuring her vision as she maneuvered toward the final threat. Ghost, SEAL birds are 5 minutes out. Whatever you're going to do, do it now. The third site remained ominously silent, and that worried her more than active missile launches. The silence stretched like a held breath as Raven circled the final SAM position, her sensors detecting the electromagnetic signature of active radar, but no missile launches. Experience told her this was the moment of greatest danger, when the enemy deviated from expected patterns and forced her to make decisions without complete information. Overlord Ghost. Target 3 shows active radar but no engagement. Recommend aborting SEAL insertion until I can confirm threat elimination. Negative Ghost. Timeline is firm. SEALs are committed to approach. Through her tactical display, she could see the two MH-60 helicopters approaching the valley mouth, their thermal signatures bright against the cool mountain air. 12 operators preparing to fast-rope into what might still be a kill zone, trusting her to have eliminated the threats that could turn their insertion into a massacre. The third SAM site finally revealed itself, but not in the way she expected. Instead of launching at her aircraft, the missile streaked toward the lead helicopter, forcing the pilot into violent evasive maneuvers that scattered the formation and disrupted the carefully choreographed insertion plan. "SAM launch, SAM launch." The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through the radio, professional calm, barely containing the strain of combat maneuvering. "Taking evasive action, aborting primary LZ." Raven felt time compress as her mind processed tactical options. The missile had missed its intended target, but the SEAL team was now scattered across secondary landing zones that hadn't been cleared of enemy presence. Worse, her remaining weapons were designed for precision strikes against fixed positions, not close air support in a fluid tactical situation. Ghost, Dustoff 27. We've got troops in contact. Grid reference follows. The radio erupted with overlapping transmissions as the ground situation deteriorated. Multiple enemy positions engaging scattered SEAL elements, close enough to friendly forces that conventional airstrikes risked friendly fire casualties. This was the scenario every close air support pilot dreaded: Americans in danger, clear targets available, but no safe weapon solutions. Raven banked hard toward the sounds of gunfire, switching her weapon selection to the 25mm cannon. Danger close air support required surgical precision and absolute trust between ground forces and supporting aircraft. One slight miscalculation could turn friendly fire into tragedy. Dustoff 27, Ghost inbound. Mark your position with infrared strobe. Danger close authorization requested. Ghost, Dustoff 27. IR strobe active, cleared hot danger close. We need immediate suppression of enemy position bearing 090 from our location. She lined up the gun run with mechanical precision, but her hands were trembling slightly as the targeting reticle settled over the enemy position. 18 months of exile from combat had done nothing to diminish her skills, but the psychological weight of responsibility felt heavier than ever. The cannon rounds stitched across the mountainside with devastating precision, each burst of high-explosive shells silencing another muzzle flash that had been threatening American lives. Raven's targeting computer painted enemy positions in stark relief against the thermal imaging display, but she relied more on instinct and experience than electronic assistance. "Good effects, Ghost," came the relieved voice of the SEAL team leader. "Enemy fire has ceased. We're moving to consolidate at the secondary rally point." But the tactical situation remained fluid and dangerous. Raven could see additional enemy reinforcements moving through the valley's network of caves and defensive positions, positioning themselves for another coordinated attack on the scattered American forces. Overlord Ghost. I'm seeing multiple groups of enemy personnel maneuvering to cut off SEAL extraction routes. Recommend immediate close air support authorization. Ghost Overlord. You are cleared to engage all hostile targets. Use your judgment on weapon selection. Her judgment. After 18 months of invisible servitude, 12 lives again depended on her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure. Raven felt the familiar clarity that came with combat, the narrowing of focus that eliminated everything except the immediate tactical problem. The remaining Hellfire missile acquired the largest concentration of enemy forces, a group of approximately 15 fighters positioning themselves along the primary extraction route. The weapon's impact scattered them across the rocky terrain, secondary explosions suggesting they'd been carrying significant ammunition. Ghost, dust off 2-7. We're ready for extraction, but the LZ is still hot. Can you provide cover during helicopter approach? Raven checked her fuel and ammunition status. Enough for one more gun run, maybe two if she managed ammunition carefully. The extraction helicopters were already inbound, their pilots threading through the same deadly valley that had nearly claimed her own life 18 months earlier. Dust off, Ghost copies. Beginning suppression runs now. She rolled inverted and pulled the F-35 into a diving attack, cannon fire walking across suspected enemy positions with methodical thoroughness. Tracer rounds sparked off rocky surfaces as hostile forces sought cover, but the psychological effect was as important as the physical damage. The first helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust and rotor wash, its crew chief waving frantically as SEAL operators sprinted toward the open doors. Raven maintained her overwatch pattern, searching for threats while the human drama played out 2,000 feet below. Dust off 2-7, all personnel aboard, moving to extract. As the helicopters lifted off and began their journey home, Raven allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The mission was complete, the operators were safe, and she had proven to herself that Ghost still existed beneath the carefully constructed anonymity of civilian life. The flight back to base passed in relative silence, broken only by routine radio calls and the steady drone of jet engines. Raven found herself studying the landscape below with new eyes, seeing not just terrain but potential battlefields where other operations might unfold. The perspective of a warrior rather than a janitor, someone whose skills mattered in the grand chess game of international conflict. Ghost Tower, you're cleared for straighten approach, runway 27. Congratulations on a successful mission. The words carried weight beyond their simple meaning. Success in military operations was measured not in personal achievement but in lives preserved, objectives accomplished, and threats neutralized. By those metrics, today had been an unqualified victory. As the F-35 touched down and rolled toward the hangar, Raven could see the ground crew waiting with the efficient precision that characterized elite military units. But there were also others, General Vaughn, Commander Morrison, Colonel Torres, waiting to debrief a mission that had implications far beyond a single tactical engagement. She shut down the engines and opened the canopy, the sudden rush of outside air carrying the familiar scents of jet fuel and hot metal. For 18 months, these smells had been absent from her life, replaced by the antiseptic odors of cleaning chemicals and industrial floor wax. "How do you feel?" General Vaughn asked as Raven climbed down from the cockpit. The question was more complex than it appeared. How did she feel about returning to combat? About proving she could still perform at the highest levels? About the likelihood that her cover identity was now completely blown? "Like I've been holding my breath for 18 months, she said finally, "and I can finally exhale." Rodriguez approached with a tablet containing post-flight inspection data. "Aircraft performed flawlessly, ma'am. No damage, all systems nominal. She's ready to fly again whenever you are." Commander Morrison stepped forward, his expression serious despite the mission's success. "Ghost, we need to discuss what happens next. Your presence here is now known to multiple intelligence networks, and maintaining your cover identity is no longer feasible." The implications were clear. Raven Nakamura, the janitor, was dead as surely as Captain Nakamura, the pilot, had supposedly died in the Korangal Valley 18 months earlier. But what would replace her? What identity could accommodate both her need for anonymity and the military's need for her specialized skills? "There's a proposition we'd like you to consider," General Vaughn said, leading them toward the secure briefing facility. "A new unit, new mission parameters, new opportunities to serve." As they walked through the hangar, past aircraft and personnel engaged in the eternal preparation for missions not yet imagined. Raven felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. The classified briefing room felt different now, that she occupied it as a military officer rather than support personnel. The holographic displays showed global threat assessments, intelligence summaries, and operational timelines that painted a picture of a world balanced on the edge of multiple conflicts simultaneously. Project Phoenix, General Vaughn began, manipulating the display to show organizational charts and mission parameters. A joint special operations unit designed to handle situations that fall between conventional warfare and intelligence operations. The concept was elegant in its simplicity: small teams of highly skilled personnel operating with minimal oversight and maximum flexibility. The kind of unit that could respond to emerging threats without the bureaucratic delays that characterized larger military organizations. Your role would be unique, Colonel Torres explained. Aviation support for operations that officially don't exist, in locations we've never visited, against enemies we've never encountered. He paused, studying her reaction. Interested. Raven examined the personnel roster, recognizing several names from elite units across all service branches. These were operators who had proven themselves in the world's most dangerous environments, individuals who understood that some missions required absolute commitment and complete operational security. What about accountability? She asked. Chain of command, rules of engagement, oversight mechanisms. You would report directly to a Joint Chiefs Subcommittee, Vaughn replied. Rules of engagement would be adaptive based on specific mission requirements. As for oversight, she smiled grimly. Some operations require trust rather than micromanagement. Commander Morrison activated another display showing potential deployment locations, hot spots around the globe where conventional forces couldn't operate effectively, but where American interests required protection. The enemy has evolved, he said. They use our own bureaucracy against us, operating in legal and political gray areas where traditional military responses are inadequate. The scope was staggering. Counterterrorism operations in urban environments, hostage rescue in denied territory, direct action against high-value targets who existed in the spaces between nations and laws. It was warfare adapted to the modern world's complexity. Timeline for decision, Raven asked, though she already knew her answer. 48 hours, Vaughn said. After that, Captain Raven Nakamura officially returns from the dead and accepts assignment to Joint Special Operations Command. She paused meaningfully. Or she chooses to remain dead, and we find another ghost to haunt our enemies. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. 18 months of exile had taught her that she couldn't escape who she was: a warrior, a protector, someone whose skills served a purpose larger than personal comfort or safety. I don't need 48 hours, General. When do we start? The transformation began immediately. Within hours of accepting the Phoenix assignment, teams of specialists descended on the base to construct new identities, establish communication protocols, and integrate her into operational frameworks that existed only in classified databases. Legend construction is critical, explained Dr. Sarah Kim, a psychological operations specialist whose job involved creating believable histories for personnel who needed to operate under deep cover. Your new identity must be robust enough to withstand investigation but flexible enough to accommodate mission requirements. Raven found herself studying documents that chronicled a life she'd never lived, military assignments to units that specialized in activities she'd never performed, training certifications for skills she'd learned through different programs, a service record that explained her current position without revealing classified capabilities. Major Elena Vasquez, she read aloud from the official personnel file. Helicopter pilot, former 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, cross-trained on multiple aircraft types. She looked up at Kim. Creative, but why change the aircraft specialty? Plausible deniability, Kim explained. Fixed-wing attack aircraft are rare enough that your skill set would be memorable. Helicopter pilots are common enough to blend in, but specialized enough to justify assignment to elite units. The logic was sound, if somewhat unsettling. Even her military specialty became part of an elaborate deception designed to hide her true capabilities while allowing her to operate in environments where those capabilities were essential. Master Sergeant Rodriguez appeared in the doorway carrying a flight suit bearing new insignia and name tapes. "Your kit, Major," she said with a slight smile. "Try not to get shot down again. We're running out of plausible resurrection scenarios." The joke carried an edge of seriousness that Raven appreciated. Military humor often masked deeper concerns about operational security and personal survival. In her new role, both would be constant considerations. Equipment selection, announced a new voice as Weapons Specialist Technical Sergeant Michael Chen entered carrying a tablet loaded with classified technical specifications. Phoenix operations require specialized gear that doesn't appear in standard inventories. The array of available equipment was impressive. Communication systems that could penetrate any electronic warfare environment, weapons adapted for specific tactical scenarios, survival gear designed for operations in hostile territory where rescue might be impossible. Personal defense weapon, Chen asked, scrolling through options that ranged from conventional sidearms to exotic systems that pushed the boundaries of current technology. Raven considered the question carefully. In her previous life, she'd relied primarily on aircraft-mounted systems for tactical effectiveness. Ground combat had been a theoretical possibility rather than a practical concern. Now, it might be the difference between mission success and personal survival. "Something reliable," she said finally. "I'd rather have simple equipment that works than complex systems that fail at critical moments." The new operational base defied easy categorization. Officially, it didn't exist, just another anonymous facility buried within the military's vast infrastructure of training centers and administrative buildings. Unofficially, it represented a new approach to asymmetric warfare, designed around the premise that future conflicts would require capabilities that traditional military doctrine couldn't provide. Major Elena Vasquez reported for her first Phoenix briefing at 600 hours, carrying credentials that would have satisfied any security investigation, but told only a carefully constructed fraction of her actual story. The briefing room held 12 personnel, each representing specialties that complemented the others in ways that weren't immediately obvious. "Team composition is intentionally diverse," explained Phoenix Commander Colonel David Park, whose own background spanned multiple service branches and classified programs. "You'll note we have no traditional command structure, no standard operating procedures, and no predetermined tactical doctrines." The roster read like a recruitment poster for unconventional warfare. Communications specialists who could establish secure networks in denied territory, medics trained in trauma care under combat conditions, language specialists fluent in dialects that most people couldn't identify, weapons experts familiar with systems that didn't appear in standard inventories. "First mission parameters," Park continued, activating a display that showed satellite imagery of a region Raven didn't immediately recognize. "Hostage rescue, but with complications that prevent conventional approaches." The tactical situation was complex enough to justify Phoenix's existence. American personnel held in a location that couldn't be reached through diplomatic channels, by captors who had proven resistant to traditional pressure tactics, in terrain that made conventional rescue operations impractical.